Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the Spinetinglers book series, and it's book number 2, Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried. Now, recently I buddy read this with some fellow reviewers out here on YouTube that I love talking to out in the Discord chat, and I love watching their content. I will link their channels in the description of this video and in the comment section. Monster Blood, aka Austin, and BD Horror. Two great fellows. We decided to all read this book at the same time, and it's taken me a while to put out a review for this, but I have to say off the bat, I think this was a fun little book, right? In case you didn't know, the Spinetinglers book series is a 30-book series from the 90s. It was a Goosebumps ripoff, and it's coined by an author called M.T. Coffin, which is playing on the term empty coffin. And each one of these books are ghostwritten by various authors, some more than others. And this book was written by George Edward Stanley, and his work for me is all over the place from what I've read from him so far. I've read quite a few, but this one I think is one of his better books. And it makes me think back to the very first book I did in this for this series called The Dead Kid Did It. And after reading this, I think I'm going to lower that book down considerably to what I gave that, because I think this is one of his better ideas. Now, is it the greatest thing ever? No, I do have issues with it, but if you haven't tried Spinetinglers before, you should really give this book a try. I think there's something in here for everyone to enjoy. It has its dark moments, its emotional moments, its lighthearted moments to it as well. It kind of has a slice of life energy to it, some relatability in terms of stuff that can happen. It gets kind of bonkers, but it's a fun one. Try this one if you haven't tried the series before. So, let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So, this book pulls out no stops and starts off with one of the saddest openings I have read since I've read Jekyll and Hyde. From Goosebumps Series 2000. So this kid named Billy Baker, if you can't tell by the title of the book, he's at the vet office, and he seems really upset because his dog named Howard is getting put down that day. And it's revealed that his dog named Howard, he's, a bigger dog. He doesn't really like most people. Doesn't like his mom. Doesn't like really anybody in this town that he lives in called Cape Flattery. But him. And his neighbor, Mr. Calhoun, is a big old jerk and constantly taunted Howard when he was alive. And Howard decided to attack him one day and left him really scarred. And Mr. Calhoun was going to potentially sue Billy and his mom. And since Billy's dad is not around, Billy's mom had no choice but to force Billy to agree to put Howard down, which is a really sad and emotional and mature thing to talk about. I was shocked when I saw that, starting off this book, but it's a very sad moment, kind of reminiscent to Marley and Me, when Howard has to get put down, and Billy just gets emotionally wrecked, and he's telling the veterinarian that's putting him down, who reluctantly doesn't want to do this as well. Seems like a family friend. His mom used to work for the vet office for him. And there seems to be like a relationship with him and his mother, where he's like going to pay for Howard's, burial and all this. And he's assuring Billy that he's going to have a funeral, and his life's not going to be all that in vain, right? But he says that Howard's going to come back and rise from the dead. Just watch. And he seems convicted about that. And it kind of gets into this background of why that's kind of bizarre for him to think about, because there is a church called the Kingdom of Resurrected Pets, which it sounds like a cult, right? And there's this church in this town that legit believes in this prophecy by this woman who started the church that one day this pet messiah of sorts is going to come and rise from the dead and bring all the animals of the dead alive from the graveyard, and they're going to come and attack all the people that were mean to them in their former lives. And Billy doesn't really believe in that, but he just felt weird and told the vet that, right? So it comes time for Howard's funeral, and he has to go home and tell his mom that Howard's having a funeral. And the mom and him are kind of talking about it, and she's like, well, we can't afford one. He's like, don't worry about it. The vet's paying for it. And the mom's like, okay, well, I'll see you at the funeral, right? And Billy's like, don't worry about it if you can't make it. So Billy goes to the funeral of Howard. And while he's there, his neighbor, Mr. Calhoun, has shown up. And him being just evil and maniacal is there to taunt Billy and also to assure that Howard was really put down. And this upsets Billy, and he gets into a war of words with Mr. Calhoun. It says that, one of these days Howard is going to come back alive and come back to, get you and give you what you deserve. And I only wish that he did more harm to you than what he did. And Mr. Calhoun kind of scoffs, and everybody's shocked about what Billy says, but he's in grief. He's grieving, right? And he's upset that his dog wasn't giving a casket, but given like this tarp and buried with a tarp. But they say that's just what they do in the graveyard. So once Howard gets buried, it's the end of that, right? And Billy has to go through this emotional journey of him trying to get over his dead dog. And when he gets home, he can't really sleep. He can't bring himself to get any shut-eye. And he starts to question, what he said. And he keeps thinking about what he said. And he reaches out to this girl named Hannah, who happens to be the daughter of the woman who runs the church of the Kingdom of Resurrected Pets. And while they're talking, Hannah's like, well, what you said, could be interesting. Why don't we go to the graveyard to see what happens? And going to the graveyard, they see Howard rise from the grave. Now, this takes Billy and Hannah back. They don't know what to believe anymore. All they know is that this is groundbreaking and maybe her mother's prophecy has come true. And now it's up to them to try to figure out how to signal Howard. But Billy, being grief-stricken, tries to call Howard, but he just doesn't respond. There's a putrid smell in the air, and he seems to be, after something. So they follow Howard, and he ends up going to Mr. Calhoun's house. And they follow Howard, and he ends up there, and of course, he is pawing at Mr. Calhoun's door, trying to get inside, and Mr. Calhoun answers, and Howard tries to come in and do something to him. And Billy and Hannah have to go try to stop Howard, and they end up doing so, and it scares Mr. Calhoun, and Howard scampers off, and they run after Howard, and he seems to be kind of losing energy and presumably dying again. So they take him and bury him back in the graveyard. And they are questioning whether they should even tell Hannah's mom about it. But Hannah's like, I feel like we should. But the prophecy didn't say that the dog was going to end up dying. They said that he was going to resurrect all the other pets. Which means that Howard just might be a fluke in all this. So what ends up happening is they bury Howard and they try to, forget about it. Well, it's revealed that Mr. Calhoun had skipped town after the events. He ran up and left. So this catches the attention of the police. And this police chief comes by Billy Baker's house to question him. And is asking him about the, what does he know? And, for him to be, saved from this prophecy, he has to join the Kingdom of the Resurrected Pets. And the police chief is essentially telling him that, he's a member of the church, or the cult, so to say. And Billy has to join to be saved. And the mom's like, I don't think this is right. Something seems off about this. And the chief's like, okay, well, we can't make you do it, but we're going to try to make you do it. And it gets kind of weird from here as the story goes on. As it's revealed that Hannah, of course, might have played a role in this and leaking some information. And the town knows that Mr. Calhoun left and knows a little bit about, some rumors, right? So the town gets kind of, worked up and starting to get worked up about this. Meanwhile, Hannah and Billy don't know how to go about handling the police who are keep showing up and trying to pressure Billy. But while all this is going on, Howard presumably comes back again, right? And with him this time are all the resurrected pets out of the cemetery, which raise the flags of, Hannah, and says, okay, this is my mom's, you know, prophecy. This is actually coming true. And throughout the rest of the story, all these pets come to life, and there's various moments throughout the story where these pets have attacked some people, and people need help. People are running away trying to pack up their car and flee town. Some people get hurt so bad they have to be taken to the hospital. And this freaks Billy and Hannah out. And they don't know what to do. And of course, they end up, with Billy's mom and the vet, who kind of have this kindling romance going on. And they decide to, accompany at the hospital as well. And while they're there, the police are there and everything, talking about, you need to be a member of the kingdom of resurrected pets so these pets don't come back and harm you. And that's the only way to get rid of them. The prophecy has come true. These pets will never go away. They're going to constantly haunt this town and keep repeatedly attacking the people that harmed them. And there's some stories about this girl who had this dog. They didn't get along, died like 7 years ago. It's now coming back trying to, attack her. And then there's some cats and stuff like that as well to some other owners. And they get this mob mentality that they want to attack Billy. Or, they want to get after Billy because Billy's the one that started all this. It was his dog, Howard, and they should blame Billy. And maybe they should join the church, and Billy's refusal to join the church is a red flag to them. And, there are some people that stick up for Billy, and it's like, this isn't Billy's fault. This is Howard doing this. We can't control this. It's not like he wanted this to happen, right? So they end up fleeing the hospital. They try to talk some sense into the town, saying that there might be a way to solve this. And the way to solve this is that they need to lure the pets back to the graveyard where they like to go and hang out when they need some downtime, and pour cement over the graves. So they come up with this plan to do so, and they head back to town. And before they do that, they have to talk to Hannah's mom. And this is the first time we meet the woman who started the church, right? And Hannah's mom seems to be just in awe that her prophecy came true, and is just worried about the town and its future, and trying to solve this. And the town ends up working together, gets most of the animals into the graveyard, but one's missing, and it's Howard. Well, meanwhile, back at Billy's, house, Billy's mom is getting attacked by Howard, and Billy and Hannah have to save Billy's mom from Howard, and Howard seems to be not like himself, and it's revealed that since Howard attacked Billy's mom is going to be constantly under attack, and it's not safe for them to be there anymore. So they end up recouping with the vet after they pour cement over the grave, since they can't find Howard after they save Billy's mom from Howard. Howard runs away, and they can't figure out where he went. So once they pour cement over the graves, they flee town, right? And the story kind of wraps up with an open-ended thing, with Billy potentially not being able to put his dog behind him, and maybe his dog is out there looking for him in his new town that he's ended up in, and there's a grim note to be taken from that. And that's essentially Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried. So this book, I will say, has a lot of emotions to it with Billy's character, and I think Billy is one of the better Spinetinglers protagonists that I've read. He's very sympathetic. He's kind of heroic, mostly relatable. Thrown into an extraordinary circumstance that's out of his control, but what makes him relatable is that, nothing he did in the story was wrong. And everything in the story was the deck stacked against him, and he had to constantly fight opposition. And having that tenacity and that will to, you know, not only maintain your image, but your pet's image, even in the legacy of your pet. Treating him like a family member, a friend. That's noble. And Billy's a great character. Hannah is a good side character. She's really intriguing. I think her and Billy have some good chemistry there. Some of the side characters in this story were really cool. I like the vet. He seemed like a good adult, you know, character in the story. He does have its moments. I didn't bring this up, but when they try to find the vet after the town goes haywire, there's a scene where he pulls a gun out on Billy, trying to question if Billy has, you know, turned over to the church. And that's a wild scene, but yeah, he has his moments of out there things, but he's a pretty good character. The mom, she's kind of iffy, but she has her moments too. The villains of the story, which I guess are the police chief and the cult of the undead animals, they have this thing about them where if you join them, somehow the animals won't attack them. And that's never really explained in the story, but it's really creepy. And like this prophecy thing, and like, why do they believe in this so much? There has to be some type of lore behind it, and I think that's why they're creepy. If they were explained any further than that, that would take away the mysticism of those characters and just either make it really hokey or really stupid. So the ambiguity there kind of helps sell that this cult of dead animal worshippers is nefarious. And the fact that they try to convert the town when this stuff goes haywire just seems kind of off, right? But it works. And the town's never the same after all this happens. You know, I kind of went over some details because I want you to be surprised. But, yeah, you really feel like everything that happened in this book mattered by the end of it, which is a lot to take away from it. You know, the story starts off in a sad note, and it builds to something grander than what it was letting on to be. And then there was lasting effects and, you know, consequences of what happened to Billy and, you know, Howard coming back to life and this church potentially influencing all this. It's a well-told story for what it is. Now, I will say that the atmosphere was kind of hit or miss. Some of the paragraph transitions were kind of off. But for the most part, the story had solid writing, solid pace, and solid build to it. Now, if I had any negatives with it, it's purely constructive criticism, and it comes down to there's something about the story that doesn't really click with me, that doesn't really sell me on it all that much, and I feel like it stems down to the second half of the story. After we deal with these police officers coming in talking about, hey, they're the chief is part of this church cult thing, which is really wild in itself. Dealing with that moving forward and how that affects the story, it does get in the way because it's never really done to its fullest potential. And I feel like at the heart of it, there could have been some tweaks to the story to kind of make the ending feel better than it was. I feel like what happens to Billy is unfair in the story, and I don't really see the direction they're working or it being as effective. Because it leaves some characters like Mr. Calhoun, who just up and disappeared from the story. It left them unpunished. The police, there are some people who escaped town, and they did some nefarious things in the story and trying to convert people and forcing people to do that. They don't really get punished. And technically they left the church and left the cult, so doesn't that make them subjected to being tormented by dead animals now? There's a lot of red tape there that just gets mulled over by the ending, and there needed to be some tweaks to change that. I would probably tweak maybe one big thing about it, and that the church element, this whole story was building up this church, but we never actually got to see the church. We never got to see Hannah's mom actually play a pivotal role in her prophecy and like what that really meant. We only got to meet Hannah's mom one time, and she was very brief in the story. The church should have played a bigger role, It should have involved the church more. Maybe had an ending or a change in the climax to where the whole climax happens at the church itself, and we get to see the cult in action and whatnot, and maybe go into the more supernatural aspect that maybe the church was manifesting these animals to come to life because the whole town thinks they're crazies and stuff like that. I think that would have been a better angle than what we got. Would have made all that hint dropping actually worth it. It would have made the story even more wilder and out there, and I think better. And I kind of would wish a better ending for Billy and Howard. But I digress. For what it is, it's still a solid book. Just it needs some tweaks there to really put it over for me. But from a 0 to 5 star basis, I knew that this was one of the better Spinetinglers books I've read. Not, you know, I know this is a fan favorite one out there. Seems to be like this one, Check It Out and Die, Snow Day, Killer Computer, and Boogie's Back for Blood seem to be really popular. But for me, I think this one's slightly overrated from what I've heard from people, but it's still a great book. I'm willing to give this about a 4 or higher. It's just not a Spinetinglers book that really spoke to me all that much. I don't quite love it, but it's almost there for me loving it. I just think that where the story ends up, it's fine, but just doesn't put me over with it. So with the constructive criticisms there, I'd probably deduct like 0.8 off, for that and some stuff in the story that, the paragraph hopping and stuff like that, and, some sloppiness to the writing in some areas. I give it about a 4.2 out of 5. Now that's where I think The Dead Kid did it. The first Spinetinglers book I reviewed that was also written by George Edward Stanley. But that one I'd probably retroactively take down, only because I think this is a step up in writing from that. But, it has its issues. It's still a great book for what it is. I definitely recommend that you go try this if you haven't tried the Spinetinglers series before. This might be a great starting point for you. Or maybe you're deeper into the series and you haven't come across this one. Maybe the cover doesn't grab you. But try it. You'll be pleasantly surprised, I think. So yeah. And relatability to Goosebumps, right? For this being like a B+ Spinetinglers, there's a lot of emotional maturity that you'll find in some Goosebumps books, but it's very uncommon to go to the lengths this book does with it. I don't think Stein is that emotionally aware sometimes, or most of the time. But the way it ends on a dark note, similar to like a Series 2000 ending, and it gets really emotional, like some Series 2000 books do. I would think this would be one of the darker Goosebumps books if we're talking like relatability. But some ideas I just don't think Stein would ever even touch. Or maybe if he did, it wouldn't be to this extent. So I'd maybe give it like a 4.5 out of 5 on the relatability scale. So yeah, there's that. So that's my thoughts on Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this book before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.